My name is Tom Dunn. I graduated from Tufts in 2000. I graduated from law school from McGeorge School of Law in Sacramento. But I live out in Massachusetts now and practice at a law firm named Pierce Atwood. I'm a litigator and practice construction law. I'm the current president of the Tufts Lawyers Association. Not to be so hyped on this. Tufts Lawyers Association is a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, and we've been formed since 2003. We have a board and we have steering committees in different parts of the country. If you want to learn more about Tufts Lawyers Association, you can reach out to me, Tom Dunn, at Pierce Atwood, or you could look at our website, tuftslawyersblogspot.com, or find us on social media at Tufts Lawyers. We created this series at the end of last year to feature one of our distinguished group of members, and that is our judges. You are a TLA member if you went to Tufts and you graduated law school. And so we thought that we would learn from our judges who are our members and hear what their experience was at Tufts and after Tufts. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to break up. We have two moderators that are going to be asking Judge Rice questions, and we're going to be having our TLA West Coast chair, Ken Priori, with Box. He's going to be fielding questions from the chat room. So if you have a question you want to pose, you can either post it directly to Ken in a private message, or you could post it to the group, and he will try to weave that in as we go. At the end of the program, we will have about 10 or 15 minutes of breakout conversation where we can get to know each other a little bit better and under smaller groups. Do want to promote one event that's coming up. It's the Tufts Law Day on the Hill. It's our signature event. It's going to be on March 4th, 2021, and we're going to be featuring the healthcare and biotech industries. And so that's an event that's for undergrads at Tufts to learn more about the practice of law, but alumni attend as well. So with that introduction, I am happy to introduce Ken, our head of the West Coast TLA. If you're interested in getting more involved in the TLA and are in California, Oregon, or Washington, or Hawaii, please reach out to Ken. Ken, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks everyone for joining this evening and this afternoon. Again, my name is Ken Priori. I'm a 91 graduate of Tufts, 95 graduate of Tulane Law School in New Orleans, and I currently practice as Global Legal Director at Box in Redwood City, California. And I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing and giving some background on our some of our presenters and for Judge Rice. And so before I get into that, I also want to sort of once again kind of promote TLA West. You know, I've been in California for 25 years, and I'm always amazed by the number of times in my sort of dealings and travels when I come across other Tufts grads. And one thing that I realized over the last year is, in particular, there just wasn't as active a presence for alumni associations on the West Coast. And so I've been working with Tom and TLA to sort of within the legal community to sort of start to create a bit more connection, foster community and foster those connections. So if you're out on the West Coast and you want to become involved and connect with other Tufts grads, you can reach out to me. My email is super easy. It's ken@box.com. But let me move to introduce a couple of the presenters tonight. First, we have John Hanover. John, after graduating from Tufts with a BA in history in '83, earned a JD at Vanderbilt Law School in '86. John's a partner in the Construction and Government Contracts Group at Alston & Bird, and for the past 35 years has had his practice focused on construction law and litigation, representing clients in multi-million-dollar claims on public and private projects. Next, I want to introduce Michael Chen. Michael Chen is Assistant Dean of Administration at the Western State College of Law in Irvine, California. He is responsible for recruiting law students and awarding scholarships. He graduated from Tufts in 1999 and from Fordham University School of Law in 2002. Michael has spent the majority of his career in legal education and an adjunct professor. He taught courses in ethics and real estate practice. Recently, he received a grant from the Law School Admission Council to fund programming for minority students. And I also have the pleasure and honor of introducing Judge Rice. Judge Rice graduated magna cum laude with a BA in history from Tufts University in 1975. He went on to earn his JD from Northeastern University School of Law in 1978. After graduating from law school, Judge Rice joined the law firm of Gottlieb, and Stein in 1978 as an associate. He practiced with the law firm until 1983 when he co-founded the law firm of Rice and Rothenberg. He was elected a court commissioner for the Los Angeles County Superior Court in 2003. He remained in that position until his appointment to the Superior Court in 2005. Some of his many leadership positions have included serving as president of the following organizations: Aranda Inns of Court, the California Judge Association, the California Court Commissioners Association, the Long Beach Bar Association, and the California Young Lawyers Association. He has served 4 times on the Los Angeles Superior Court Executive Committee and has been a member of the State Bar Board of Governors and the Judicial Council of California. In 2012, Judge Rice received the McFadden Judge of the Year Award from the South Bay Bar Association. So join me in welcoming Judge Rice to this program. And Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ken. And thank you very much, Judge Rice, for joining us this evening. I'm very excited for this opportunity to learn more about you and your life and what you can share with us. Ken shared with us a little bit about your history and your background. You have a very interesting background, but I'd like to begin at the beginning, as they say, and ask you, how did you first become interested in the legal profession?
Well, I think it started with my dad. May he rest in peace. My dad was a businessman in Boston, but I think what he always really wanted to do was move to California and become a lawyer. And as his oldest son, I think he put that idea in my head. We used to debate whether I wanted to become a lawyer, and he said good idea, or the other way around. But I do know when I was in 9th grade, my birthday gift was an old sign which said honest lawyer, 1 flight up, which he thought was a great gift for me. So I would say my dad put the idea in my head, but at least at my time at Tufts, all of us either went to law school, medical school, MBA, joined their father's multi-million-dollar business, or my friend Jim was on the line who got a PhD in sociology from Princeton. So going to law school was natural for me. I've always enjoyed being involved in things like debate, speaking, and litigating. And so after my initial thought when I was younger of being a history teacher and a track coach, law school was the way to go and was the right move for me. You're muted, John.
Every great conversation starts with "you're on mute." That's the way I see it these days. So very nice to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to join us. My pleasure to meet you. And you know, you have had a distinguished career as a jurist, but also your service to the bar is really exceptional, and your service to the judiciary. So in front of this crowd, and for me personally, who has had a life on the other side of the bench and the bar, I really appreciate it. So thank you. In terms of, you know, yes, your father put that idea in your head and now you're on your road. How do you actually become a judge? How did you become a judge? What was the process for doing that?
It's very interesting. And I've learned a lot more about this because every state is different, as we're learning about so many things over the past couple of years. But in many states, all judges are elected. California, almost all of us are appointed by the governor. However, there is a little wrinkle in California that if a judge retires within 90 days of the end of his or her term, that becomes an open seat and you can run for that seat. But I was appointed by, of all people, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, you know, as we know, became, for those of us that live in California, the recall of Gray Davis, open election, and all of a sudden the Terminator was our governor. And although he was a Republican and I'm a Democrat, it is the third question on the judicial application, which takes about 100 hours to prepare. It is all consuming. And then they send out all these mailings about you to all the lawyers so that find out what kind of person you are. And then you hopefully get the interviews. But the third question on the application after name and address is, what party do you belong to? And Governor Schwarzenegger had said that he was going to, in his view, appoint the best people, didn't care what party you were from. But one of the very first questions asked of me when I made it to that final interview with the governor's appointment secretary in Sacramento was, I see that you're a Democrat. But I was prepared for that question. And you got to think back, because in those days, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Governor Schwarzenegger, was still happily married to Maria Shriver, no longer, but at that time. So I could say to him, and I actually made the person that was interviewing me chuckle a bit when I said, as you can see, I grew up in Massachusetts, and for everyone that grew up in Massachusetts, we all grew up as Kennedy Democrats. So I think I took care of that issue. So, you know, when I look back now, I had my own part of a small law firm. We had a very varied practice. Most of my colleagues, it has changed somewhat with Jerry Brown as governor, but most of my colleagues, when I got on the bench, were either a lot of them were former prosecutors, former DAs, attorney generals, U.S. attorneys, city attorneys, and people from big firms who had a connection. Right. So there were very few people like myself. So I did not really choose the traditional path if my goal was to become a judge. And I'd always thought I might want to be a judge. I had a judicial internship when I was in law school, which I loved. But with my former partner, who I believe is on the call somewhere, we had a wonderful practice. We had a good time. We served the interests of a lot of people, a lot of small companies. So I kind of put the idea in the background. And then I was hired by the court in the year 2000 to be an as-needed juvenile court referee. One of my areas of practice was juvenile delinquency defense. And so the juvenile courts, they try not to close them. So when a juvenile judge was out, they wanted that court to remain open. So they had these as-needed referees, which is akin to being a substitute teacher. I would get a phone call at 6 in the morning saying, Mr. Rice, we need you to go to this court in Pomona today, or wherever, anywhere in the county. And for those of you that aren't from LA, it's the largest county in the country, largest court system in the country. So I was still practicing and also sitting on the bench, you know, a few days a week. Sometimes I get asked to sit for a couple of weeks. And I really loved it. I had sat as a judge pro tem, a lawyer sitting in small claims and traffic court, but I was getting paid to do this. I was still allowed to practice. It's kind of like the best of both worlds, except that I was exhausted, because after my day on the bench, then I'd go to the office and, you know, work late to cover that day's work. So once I got involved in that milieu of people, a lot of them were thinking about applying to be commissioners or judges. And I started to think about, wow, if I could go home instead of back to the office at the end of this day, which I'm really enjoying, that would be great. So I applied to be a commissioner and a judge at the same time in the early 2000s, after I'd been a referee for a couple of years. And I applied while Gray Davis was still governor, and I made it through all the different steps. You know, it's not like applying for a job. You send in your application. Nobody says anything to you other than you get a little note that we've received your application. Then all of a sudden you get a phone call which says, I'm on the governor's committee. We're looking into you, and we need to talk with you. And then you make it to the next step, and then the State Bar Commission that evaluates the judges sends out forms about you to everyone. And then if you do well there, you make it to that interview. And then if that goes well, then you get to interview with the governor's appointment secretary. So I had made it through all those steps with Governor Gray Davis. And then, as for those of us who know California's political history, he was then recalled from office for without any malfeasance when you look back on it, but he was recalled from office. So I was still in that small pile. He had 6 openings left to fill, and all 6 of those appointments, I know all the 6 because I was a commissioner by then. Those were all people that were connected to him in some way. You know, there's a political aspect to the appointments for some. I had no political connections to either Gray Davis or to Arnold Schwarzenegger, for that matter. So I had become a commissioner of the court in early 2003, and then I reapplied. You have to do it all over again with a new governor. And I don't think Governor Schwarzenegger knew that one of his jobs was to appoint judges. I don't think he realized that, because he didn't appoint any judges.
No one filled him in on that.
Right. So he didn't appoint anyone for a whole year. But I went through the process fairly quickly after I applied. I was in I was doing a lot of good things. I was in this very building down the other end of this hallway doing small claims court, and then I was being moved around, doing all kinds of stuff, probate, civil stuff, and so I was appointed by the governor in July, actually my wife's birthday in 2005. So for the most part, it's an application process. And really what's really important is that you have a reputation in the legal community where you're not going to get dinged when hundreds of these forms go out about you and 50 people write back and say you're a big jerk. You know, that's going to hurt your application. So that's how I did it. And frankly, I love my time as a lawyer. I really enjoyed running, having our own law firm, helping people in small businesses. But it was like starting all over when I became a judge, and I love being on the bench. Not right now with the pandemic, but I love being on the bench, and it was a good transition for me, and I haven't regretted it at all for a day. It's been just a wonderful, wonderful time to try to do justice, provide equal justice to all for all the people that come before us. So that's my path.
Great. We heard Ken talk about your transition from private practice to the bench, and you talked about for a little while having the best of both worlds and then wanting to go home at the end of the night. Can you talk a little bit more about that transition from practicing law to adjudicating cases? I'm interested in learning more about the mental shift that people might have to take from becoming an advocate to being someone, becoming a judge.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I do here at the LA Superior Court is whenever we have a new group of judges, we have a sort of a new judge orientation within our own system. And I teach the class to all the new judges on bench conduct and demeanor. I've been doing that for about 12 years. And these kinds of issues come up. But I remember when I first got on the bench, I think I went about a year and a half where I didn't get through a night's sleep without having a dream that I had snuck out and gone to court as a lawyer, hoping nobody would catch me. Because, you know, that transition, it does take a while from advocate to neutral arbiter. Mm-hmm. And some people have more trouble with it than others. I think, for example, somebody that's been a DA or a public defender where all they've done is criminal law from one side their whole career. I mean, I represented plaintiffs and defendants. I did criminal, I did juvenile, I had very varied practice. They have a much harder time not automatically either siding with the prosecutor or trying so hard not to that they go the other way. But I mean, it's been a long time now, but the transition is one that everybody goes through. And for the first 6 to 9 months or so of being a judge, you're just so excited about being a judge. No matter what happens, it's all good. Every day is a good day. And in time, I was able to recognize that, you know, I'm not going to cross-examine this witness. You should have asked this witness that question. I mean, I wouldn't do that. But when I was brand new as a commissioner, I did small claims court. There are no lawyers. You're the one that has to control the proceedings. So that was something I'd also done as a lawyer on a volunteer basis. But it is difficult, and some have trouble doing it. Some people never lose what it means to be an advocate, and you cannot do that. You know, when you have self-represented litigants in front of you, our code of ethics allows us to assist, but there's a line. You know, I mean, an example that I use is I was doing an unlawful detainer case, an eviction case. The landlord had a lawyer. The tenant had gone to legal aid for advice, but legal aid wasn't going to come to court with her. And she was sitting there with a pile of papers in front of her. And I said, do you want to cross-examine the landlord? And she, of course, started telling me how the landlord was mistreating her. And I didn't cross-examine for her. And then I said, well, it's your turn, tell me. And she told me what she wanted to tell me. And she hadn't made any reference to that pile of documents. And the whole time I'm thinking, am I going too far if I ask her what those documents are? And I said, I see you have documents in front of you. Is there anything there that you would like me to see? Objection, Your Honor, from the landlord's attorney. But that was perfectly appropriate in my role as a neutral arbiter. If I had said to her, you should ask him why he didn't serve the 3-day notice within in a timely manner, that would have been crossing a line. Then I would have still been an advocate. So those are some of the things that go on in that regard. So it's amazing how many of my experiences that immediately come to mind were in my early years, you know.
Hey, Judge
Um,
Rice, this is Ken. I have a question from the audience.
Okay, great.
Maybe on the same thread of talking about what the practice is like sort of in the courtroom, I think this is a timely question, is what's changed over the last year in the current COVID moment? Is everything, I think folks would really want to hear, like, what is it like? Are cases happening over Zoom? Does anything happen over Zoom, or is it still all in person?
Well, as you may know, right now, sort of surprisingly, Los Angeles County has the worst numbers in the whole country for COVID. You know, and we're a warm weather climate. It's kind of surprising, but it has been horrific here of late. So when it was declared a pandemic back in March, we basically closed except for emergency matters. You know, domestic violence restraining orders, arraignments, no trials. And my time at the courthouse, I got to a point where we were basically at home. We stayed at home. I had meetings and things, had occasional conferences on cases, but I was making no rulings. My staff was all at home, and we were shut down for 3 months. That's when I grew my beard. That I was going to shave before I came back, but my wife said she liked it, so I kept it. So that was kind of, when you look back now, because we're almost a year in, we should be shut down now. And we were shut down then. And LA's numbers were never good. It was always bad, but it was never horrific like it is now. There are no ICU beds open. People all around me on my floor, staff members, and a couple of judges have all had COVID. I've been tested twice because of fear of exposure. Just got my first vaccination shot the other day, as a matter of fact. Very hard to get an appointment. So we are open. We've got plexiglass up. I don't know what plexiglass does. Nothing stops this virus. And most people are appearing virtually or remotely. Because we're so big, we invented our own platform, which doesn't work very well. And most people are appearing by audio. Some appear by video. And we've just decided at a meeting fairly recently that we are going to start trying to do actual trials again. I haven't done a real trial in many, many months. And we are going to try to do trials either in a hybrid format, fully remotely, and we are going to use Zoom or some other platform. There's, entrepreneurs have already invented a kind of a Zoom Plus so that the lawyers and the court reporter and the witnesses can all be on my screen in my courtroom and nobody's in the room except for me. We talked about our working from home, over the computer, but the decision was made that the judge has to be in the courtroom. There are some judges that are more compromised health-wise than I think I am, and they do their calendars from their chambers where I am right now. I'm in my chambers. So even though they're in the courthouse, they're not taking the bench. I take the bench every day with a mask. Masks are mandatory. We know what masks have become as a political issue in society, but you cannot come into this courthouse without a mask on. And I don't know why people in the hallway that are waiting to have usually their family law, a lot of the family law litigants still come in personally. I don't know why people think they have to drop their mask down to their chin when they talk on their cell phone, which is of course when more and more of their particles are. So I walk into my, I walk down that long public hallway in some trepidation. So most things are done either video or audio or both. And I have to say it is awful. It is, every day is so much more difficult, so much more stressful than it was before we hit the pandemic. And, we're the third branch of government. We don't want to close. We want to feel like, in our democracy, it's very important that people know that they can still have their cases heard. There is a lot of frustration, especially among the civil bar, because of course, criminal cases have to go first. There's a statewide and a national moratorium on eviction cases. Last I heard, the LA Superior Court has over 150,000 unlawful detainer filings that we haven't adjudicated. So it is going to be nuts when that moratorium is lifted. So things have changed and for all of us, all of the judges, very, very dramatically. And several of my people that I view as mentors, older than I am, judges longer than I have retired over the last few months and are continuing to do so because some out of fear, but more out of it's just too hard. Everything is just hard. And I tell the lawyers, I think it's harder for the litigators. I don't know how you take a depot, take a remote depot. All our settlement conferences are being done remotely. I know that Zoom can put you, like we're going to do at the end of this, into a private room, but it's just not the same. I love to do settlement conferences, but I want to do them live. I think it's much more effective. So being a judge, being a litigator has changed dramatically over these last 10 months, and it's not, hopefully by summer will be a little bit better. But I'm not, like we've even been told, I'll just add this one last point. Our presiding judge, who's a friend of mine, I know him very well, and he made a decision that in terms of civil jury trials, he's leaving that to the sound discretion of each of us, that he didn't make a blanket rule, no jury trials. And I said to him, I said, I think you should have, because I don't want my colleague 2 doors down to say, hey, I'm bringing in a jury, because that puts all of us at risk. I am not, since it is up to me, I tell all the lawyers, you want a jury trial, you're going to have to wait. I am not bringing in jurors. I know there was one jury trial in early January, and 3 of the jurors had COVID within 3 days, and a mistrial was declared. So so right now in LA, you can't do anything without COVID being all around you. It is scary as hell.
Yes, you're right. And as a litigator, I would echo what you say, Judge Rice. From this side, trying to take a depot, trying to conduct a trial. I have colleagues who have had trials. It's a different world, and it takes different skills, and it takes, a different presentation style. So one question I would have for you is, and you've been observing this now for 9 or 10 months, and of course work with lawyers in your courtrooms for a long, long time. The lawyers on the call or on the video, what can you say are best practices that you've seen, things that work, behaviors that work, things you'd like to encourage in the bar, and behaviors that don't, or practices that don't, from your perspective?
During this time, or when we go back to normal, or both?
Both. But this time in particular,
Right, well,
but I'm sure you have things that stick out in your mind for before, that you can share with us too, about good and bad practices.
Well, absolutely. Look, it's difficult, and I try to be as understanding as possible. A lot of lawyers are working from home. They're not going to their offices. So I had one case just the other day. There were 7 lawyers on the call. All 6 were on audio. 1 was on video, and they don't identify themselves when they're going to speak. It's mostly, I think in that particular case, it was mostly men. So I counseled, you have to give your name. And sometimes they have a court reporter out there somewhere. They're not in my courtroom. So I said, you have to say who you are before you speak. So after all 7 of them were basically made their appearances, I then said, because, one of the things I miss, I get more laughs when people are in the courtroom, although I take my job very seriously. When you can be lighthearted, I try to let people feel comfortable in my courtroom. So after the 7 lawyers introduced themselves, I said, isn't the dog going to be introduced? Because a dog had been barking the entire time. And, this little high-pitched dog. And so I've heard dogs barking, I've heard kids screaming, and I've heard toilets flushing. So if you're going to work from home, which I understand, you really got to get yourself into a quiet space where you are, in essence, in your office. You have to treat it like you are standing in front of me. And, this ties in with both. John, I think this asks both parts of your question. When you're in my courtroom in the old days, and hopefully in the future days, I really give lawyers an opportunity to state their position, respond again if it's an interesting issue that is there's still more to say and you're not just repeating yourself. But I will not let lawyers interrupt each other. I will cut you off right then. I'll say, counsel, let him finish. Let her finish. I will let you be heard again. So that's one blanket rule. Do not interrupt. It's hard. Write it down. Write a note of what you want to say. Today, these days, the lawyers are interrupting me. They're interrupting each other, not out of rudeness. I said to my clerk today, as a matter of fact, I had heard enough on this particular argument. I said, okay, counsel, thank you. And he either didn't hear me, didn't want to hear me, or there's a delay. I'm not really sure, but I mean, I must have said, counsel, stop, you know, like about 6 times before he finally stopped. Now, I didn't reprimand him because I don't think he did anything wrong. If a lawyer's in front of you and you tell them, all right, counsel, I've heard enough on that point, and they keep talking, it's much more obvious that they're just ignoring the judge. So it's very, very difficult. And, you know, in LA, I would say right now, and I hate to say this, because I'd much rather you're all on video like this, like we are now, but our video system is not ready. It was rolled out much too fast, and because it had to be out of an emergency. And I rarely get through a full video hearing without something going wrong. Somebody being knocked off or frozen or mute. They're not muted, but you can't hear them. So that's just unique to us here in LA. So I could talk more about it, but I think that's an answer to your question.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, John, Michael, and Judge Rice, I have a couple questions from the audience that can kind of all tie together. And I think for both Michael and Judge Rice, you might have a perspective. There's some both law students and pre-law folks on the call, and they want to know sort of for the law students, how, you know, Judge Rice, what's your best feedback on how someone could get a judicial clerkship or be in the running for a clerkship when they're in law school? As I assume extern, and then more broadly, if someone is at Tufts and they're thinking about going to law school, kind of what advice would you have to that student about sort of how to set themselves up to continue to either work in the judicial branch or as they go through law school, kind of set themselves up right so they can find a career in the judicial branch of service?
Okay, well, I can certainly address both of those questions. The first thing I want to say is that having gone to Tufts was a real advantage when it was time to apply to law school. To come from a school with the reputation, the academic reputation that Tufts has, I'm sure Michael would echo that, I think gave me more options about where I got into, you know, and so that if you're a Tufts student and you want to go to law school, if you do well and you don't completely blow the LSATs, you will have an opportunity to become a lawyer. In terms of externships, it's very important to me. I've had 50 or 60 externs over the last 12 years or so. And I actually had a Zoom call last night with 2 of my externs, and I said, how long have you guys been lawyers now? And they've been lawyers for 7 years, you know, and so I have a lot of them. I have 2 right now, but unfortunately they're not allowed in the building. And the whole experience that makes it work is to watch the calendar, to watch the motions being argued, one case after another. Here are the good lawyers, here are the bad lawyers. And then I always bring them into chambers afterwards. And I said, what'd you learn? What'd you notice? What questions do you have? And I think it's worth a week of watching my civil calendar is worth your whole semester of civil procedure in law school. Interestingly, I wasn't interested in hiring a second extern for this semester because my extern from last semester was going to stay on. And also he was told he couldn't come in the building anymore, which was very disappointing to him. So I had no interest in hiring a second extern, but then I got a call from a retired Court of Appeal justice, one of my mentors, who said he had this student, because he's teaching at law school, a local law school. He had this student who was like president of the student body, and he was a 3rd year, and he was really interested in an externship. And so I said, well, I'll talk with him. And I agreed to have him come on, but told him that he wouldn't be able to come into the courthouse. And by coincidence, I hope he's on the call somewhere, Tufts University graduate. And so a Tufts guy is my present extern. He's a law student now here local at a local law school. And, you know, I've had a few college kids come in, mostly referred to me through a friend or something. My preference is to have law students, even a 1st-year summer law student. We have a very big program here for summer externs. I don't expect them to do much work, but when, you know, by the time you're 3rd year and you've taken evidence and you're almost ready to become a lawyer, there are projects I will give you to do that are meaningful, that are helpful to me, help me write a decision after a court trial or something like that. I had an externship when I was at Northeastern Law School with a Superior Court judge in the Superior Court in Suffolk County. And that's really what got me thinking about maybe someday becoming a judge. Judicial externships, they're not really, to me, they don't seem that hard to get, because I know if I interview 5 people and I like all of them, I'll hire all of them. I'm not paying you. And that way you get the experience, and sometimes they become friends with each other. And so it's all good. But I think you have to, make a connection, be assertive, like this young man that's working with me now who went to Tufts. I mean, the reason he's with me is because he went up to his professor, who's a retired Court of Appeal justice, and asked him, and, boom. And that's how he got connected to me. So.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same experiences that Judge Rice had when I was in law school at Fordham University. My first summer after my 1L year, I was the summer judicial extern for a magistrate judge in the Southern District of New York. And it's, as Judge Rice mentioned, sometimes it comes down to being assertive. I remember for those of you in law school around this time of year, if you're a first year student, you get a little bit nervous because you hear all your friends getting all kinds of summer externships. This person's going to U.S. Attorney's Office. This person's doing this. And I didn't have anything around February. And I remember that I was part of a student organization called the Asian Pacific American Law Students Association. And I just went to we were assigned mentors, and my mentor was the president. I said, "What'd you do your first summer?" And he said, "Well, I worked for this judge." And I said, "Do you think I could work in federal court?" He said, "Sure, just write an email, say that I referred you." And I did, and I got interviewed, several rounds of interviews. And so, and I got it. It was fantastic. That was where I learned to write, not in legal writing course during 1L year in law school, but I learned to write and research by working for the judge. So judicial externships are really, really important, not to mention they look great on your resume when it comes time to interview as well.
Not only do they look good on your resume, but I've had a few, a number of externs that were actually already lawyers, during the economic slowdown, and well, we're in another one now, but around, after the housing crisis and everything in 2009, 10, 11, new lawyers weren't getting jobs. The job market was awful. So I had a couple of people who were working with me for months, who were lawyers. They were waiting bar results, or they already passed the bar. And I had 2 of them I had to finally kick out. I said, you guys go make a living now, but they were having so much fun, and they were doing real things, real work for me, and getting good writing samples. But one especially, I mean, he was married, he was in his early 30s. He had been he was in the Marines, he was fought in Iraq. So, I mean, this guy was very marketable, but he came back from his first interview with a firm that hired him, and he said, "Judge Rice, I just want to thank you so much, because I was teaching the partner who was interviewing me things that he did not know about how the way the court works. Things that I take for granted, getting in the back hallways, knowing how it works, what time you should be here, and what are some of the peccadillos of certain judges, etc., and how certain procedural things work. He knew more about it than the partner, and he felt that was why they offered him the job, because they knew he had something to contribute immediately.
Yeah, you definitely pick up a lot of things during the externships. And Judge Rice, you mentioned college students. And when I was at Tufts, actually, I shadowed a couple of judges in Massachusetts, in the Cambridge Superior Court, I think, in Gloucester. And at that time, I don't know if it's still a Tufts thing, but during the winter intersession, they had something called a shadowing program. And I remember I was thinking about going to law school. And I was thinking, well, maybe, I should talk to some judges. And I just went to the Career Center on campus at Tufts, and they had all these alums who were judges. And I remember I was staying in Massachusetts for several years. And I got to watch these wonderful trials. I was in Worcester also, it really, really reaffirmed my decision to go to law school. So the first thing I would say to the students out there who are asking, well, where do I start? You start with your career services office. And just remember, all of you, some of you have graduated Tufts, some of you are still at Tufts, but even if you've graduated, you have those career services for life, because you're a jumbo and you graduated from Tufts. If you're in law school, same thing. Go to your career planning office, career development office, whatever it's called, and they have a lot of connections. I've worked at 4 different law schools, and I know that they usually hire past presidents of bar associations, people really well connected, and they love talking to you. So simple answer is go visit your career counselors.
Well, Michael, I just want to say good for you that you did that while you were at Tufts. When we had our intercession, one year it was longer than usual because of power shortages and stuff. And my friend Peter and I, Peter's on the call somewhere, we took a scuba diving class offered by Tufts. We did not go follow judges. And we actually did our open water dive in early April in the ocean, freezing. But I'll never forget that. But that helped build my character as well. So.
Judge Rice, let me go back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation, and
Sure.
something I'm very interested in, which is you mentioned kind of equal access to the justice system and
Yes.
working towards that. And so my question is really, how are we doing? What can we do better? How are we doing in terms of diversity in the bench? How inclusive is our system? You know, what should this crowd be focusing on to improve the judicial system in that way?
Well, again, I think every state is different. And of course, the federal system is largely dependent on who the president is, who he or maybe she eventually chooses to nominate. But, you know, I've been on the bench full time since 2003. And when I joined the bench, and we had a Republican governor, Pete Wilson, and then Gray Davis, although a Democrat, didn't appoint anybody from the criminal defense side, you know, again, mostly prosecutors and big firm attorneys. I think the bench at that time was mostly prosecutors and mostly white men. And Jerry Brown, who was, governor for the second time, and frankly didn't really care about what people thought about him. He wasn't trying to move up to another office. He's an older man at this point. He was governor for the last 8 years until we had our most recent election. And he changed the face of the court completely. He appointed so many people from the defense side in the criminal world, which was unheard of. And he appointed people of all ages, all backgrounds. He had a lot of firsts, you know, like the first woman born in Vietnam to be appointed to the Court of Appeal in a certain district. I'm starting to feel older. A lot of my colleagues are in their early to mid 40s. But if you walk into the LA Superior Court now and, you know, just sort of walk from courtroom to courtroom, it is much different. I think there's still more men than women, but that's only because the older people are more men than women. I think if you looked at the appointments, starting with Jerry Brown forward, it would probably be about 50-50. And some of the stories, the background, you know, I grew up in a regular middle-class family and I didn't have to overcome any tremendous adversity or anything to go to law school. But some of the stories of my colleagues, what they've done on their own, countries that they escaped from without, you know, with no parents holding the hand of their 8-year-old brother, coming to America with nothing. And then, you know, now they're judges of the Superior Court. I mean, it's amazing, some of these stories and some of the backgrounds of these people that come from, you know, different countries or different ethnic and backgrounds and national origins. So I think we've been doing a great job with diversity on the bench. And the bar, you know, the legislature in California has often commented that the bench of bar should be more diverse. They don't complain about it as much as they did before. But, you know, when I hire my externs, for example, I try to be diverse in my hiring of externs as well. Frankly, I've learned more about numerous cultures from my externs, you know, people that I've never been had as close friends, and gotten to know them and their families. And how many of my interns that I've had, when they've introduced me to their parents who barely speak English, you know, whatever their native language is. And these kids are, I mean, they're completely self-motivated, and they have parents who came to this country so that their children could have a better life. But I still think, though, that many of our minority groups are underrepresented in the bar. So if becoming a judge is the goal, and let's take the Latino community in LA, for example. I mean, the Latino community in LA is high 30s, maybe 40% of all of LA County. I have numerous friends that are Latino judges, but I think in the bar, it's 10 to 12% of the bar, are Latinos by background. So as a result, you're not going to have 40% of the bench end up with that kind of opportunity.
Right.
So, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think. I think it's been very, very important, and people. I think people are paying more attention. There's far more diversity training going on. I've taught several classes on implicit bias. I had to learn more about it for myself. Well, I know what bias is, but what's implicit bias? And it's a fascinating topic to recognize that we all have biases, and to be able to help recognize what your biases are so that they're no longer implicit, they're now explicit. And now that you know you have it, you do what you can to rid yourself of that. So equal access to justice is also where you began. Diversity is one thing, but equal access to justice, I mean, let's face it, you're a big firm partner, and somebody wants to sue a big corporation, and that big corporation is going to hire one of the top law firms, and they're going to put 4 lawyers on that case, and the plaintiff may be represented by a solo practitioner. Well, there's equal access to justice, but is that truly equal, right? I mean, that bigger firm can just put far more resources into that case than somebody else can. So I have found that there's certain types of cases where California, which is a pretty liberal state, very democratic state, we have certain consumer-oriented statutes that have attorney's fees provisions. So our employment law, wrongful termination cases, I have so many of those cases, largely because the plaintiff's bar has grown exponentially because of the opportunity, if you're successful, to recover attorney's fees. We also have lemon law cases, it's the Song Beverly Act here over a defective car. I wish I had fewer of those cases, but again, attorney's fees provision. And as a result, a lot of law firms have grown up in that arena as well. So I think part of it is legislative, so that the opportunity to even bring a case has become more attractive to the legal community because of the potential to recover fees at the end of the case, where their client can't, of course, afford to pay them an hourly rate. So we got a long way to go, but it's a lot better than it was.
Well, we keep moving in the right direction, hopefully, both on the access to justice and the diversity front. But you're right, we do have a long way to go, and I think it takes a very concerted, collective effort to move us in the right direction.
Well, I think President Obama once said, probably said it more than once, it just seems that we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Right. Well, if we do that every time, we're still moving 1 step forward.
Right.
So hopefully we'll do that.
You're good at math. Very good.
Hey, folks, I want to leave some time for networking. So if there's one last question, Michael, I want to ask the judge, and if anyone else has a question, just put it in chat.
Sure. One last question, and I see also Amy told us to ask our favorite questions now. So, Judge, you've been on the bench for a while now, so I was hoping maybe you could share with us what you like most about being a judge and what you like least about being a judge.
Well, right now it's awful, but I hate COVID. But what I like most about being a judge is I go home virtually every day knowing that what I did that day made a difference in a micro way and in a macro way. In a micro way, that dispute can be brought into a courthouse, doesn't have to be fought out in the streets, and people can feel comfortable that they were heard. And at least we try to provide equal access to justice for all. I take great pride in that. I'm still very proud of being a judge. I don't take it for granted. I know that it's a great honor. So generally speaking, the ability to mete out justice is what I love the most. And what I like the least, I would say, is the continuing lack of civility that for some reason continues. I mentioned before we started to this small group that I was recently appointed to a state bar task force on civility. So we're going to be studying it, talking about it, working on it. How can we improve it? And it really manifests itself in my type of assignment where I do large civil cases in what we call discovery disputes, fights over depositions or documents or interrogatories. And I do what are called informal discovery conferences So they don't have to file a discovery motion. They just have a conference call with me and I give them guidance and we try to work it out in a friendly manner. But it is unbelievable how often those two lawyers who have already developed an acrimonious relationship, they're on the phone with the judge and they're screaming at each other. And I say, counsel, you know, you can scream at each other without me. The reason we're having this call is so that you don't have to scream at each other. It's not healthy even for you. So I'm not saying that it happens all the time, and it's a very small percentage. Most lawyers are strong advocates. They're doing their job. They are very ethical. But it is frustrating to have to sometimes feel as though you're the only parent in the room. And so that's what I like least. I feel like the focus should be on the big issues instead of fighting over whether I have to answer interrogatory number 4. So.
Well, great. Thank you, Judge Rice. Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael. That was a great talk. So now we've got some time left over. We're going to jump out into some breakout rooms to kind of get to know each other a little bit more and do some networking. And again, I'll be a plug for folks who are interested in being part of the TLA West. Feel free to reach out to any of the TLA members who've been on this call or out to me directly. And my email again is ken@box.com.
Thank you. It's been my honor to be asked to do this, and always proud of my having a Tufts degree, and definitely was the foundation of everything that has come for me since.